You can think of the Bible like a diary. It's a record of people's relationship with God and their growing understanding of who God is. And of course it culminates in the New Testament, where God reveals himself in Jesus. But if you look at the early parts of the Bible, you might be amazed at the number of dysfunctional relationships that are there. Think Adam and Eve and all that went on there. They weren't talking together, they weren't working together, they were actually working against each other. Well, think Cain and Abel. Think Abraham and Ishmael. Ishmael was his first son by his wife's handmaiden. And just think how different world history would have been if that whole thing hadn't happened, if Abraham and his wife Sarah had trusted God completely. Think of Jacob and Esau. Esau was the firstborn, according to the rules there. Remember, they tied a piece of cord around the first leg that came out and got dragged back in, and then Jacob came out and Esau next. But technically, Esau was the first one who came out. And the father, Isaac, loved Esau, and the mother loved Jacob. And Jacob, Esau was a pretty straightforward guy. He's a sort of, bloke who calls a spade. But Jacob, he's the devious one. He's the one you can't trust. Don't turn your back on him, because you'll find that you've been stolen all your clothes or something. So there's that whole thing there. But then Jacob realises that if he sticks around, Esau is actually physically a lot tougher than he is. And so he heads off and he works for his uncle Laban. Laban is a bit like Jacob. He's devious. He's a bit of a scoundrel. So Jacob says, I'll work for you. And Laban says, what do you want for wages? And Jacob says, well, I'm really in love with your younger daughter, Rachel. And Laban says, well, work for me and I'll give her to you in marriage. But when the time comes for the marriage, of course, the bride is brought in veiled, and Jacob marries her and discovers that Laban has married off his older daughter, Leah, to Jacob. And Jacob has to work 7 more years to get Rachel as his bride. And the Bible says, but those 7 years were like a week, because Jacob was in love with Rachel. And Jacob, of course, wrestled with God and was named Israel. And the Jews are still called the children of Israel. And there were 12 of them and 1 girl. So Leah had Reuben, Simeon, Levi and Judah. And then Rachel said, this is not good, because Leah's giving my husband all of the children, and everything will go to her children, and I have no children. So she gives her handmaiden Bilhah to her husband and says, look, sleep with her and she can have babies for me. So Bilhah has Dan and Naphtali. And then Leah says, okay, that's easier than me having them. She gives her handmaiden Zilpah, Bilhah, Zilpah. I'm sure I get them mixed up. And Zilpah has Gad and Asher. And then Leah has Issachar and Zebulun and the daughter Dinah. And in there's one of what I think must be one of the saddest verses in the Bible, because Leah says, perhaps if I give my husband another child, he will love me. Think about that. Think about the pain that lies behind that. And then at last, Rachel has Joseph and Benjamin. And so if you count them up, there are 12 male heirs, the children of Israel. And if you look at the tribes of Israel, there are the 12 tribes. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, and so on are the tribes of Israel that we know today. But there's no tribe of Joseph. Well, the story goes that Joseph in Egypt had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and they received their grandfather's blessing along with the other children, his other children, and they are considered to be half-tribes. So together they make the tribe of Joseph. And Joseph, remember, was the first child by his beloved wife. All the others are just, wombs to have children, wombs to give me sons. That's the important thing, I've got to have sons. And so he doted on Joseph. And Joseph, being young, lapped it up and lorded it over all of his brothers. He was a real pain in the fleet. And his father gave him an overseer's coat to make it clear that he was in fact the boss. And the brothers didn't like it. And in fact they conspired together to kill him. And so once they're out looking after the flocks and Joseph comes out with orders for them and starts bossing them around again, and they grab him, rip off his coat and beat him up. And they're going to kill him, but Judah says, no, look, let's not have our brother's blood on our hands. Let's throw him in that pit over there and let him die naturally. It won't be our fault. He dies, he'll just die of starvation. Yay. Not sure which I'd rather. And then they kill a goat and they spread the blood on the cloak and take it back to the father and say Joseph has died. But which one is it? Judah has actually planned that he'll come back that night and rescue Joseph. But instead they see a caravan, a slaving caravan go past, and they think, oh, we can make a few shekels out of this. And so they sell him off into Egypt. Now, put yourself in the mind of Joseph at this stage. Privileged, mollycoddled, spoilt brat. What is he thinking as he's sold off to go as a slave to wherever? And you think he's really building up a lot of hate, a lot of resentment, a lot of self-righteous anger about this whole thing. His brother's certainly feeling quite guilty about it, actually. But during that trip, Joseph somehow changes. And so when he's sold as a slave in Egypt, and he goes to work for the household of Potiphar, he has found God, really. And when Potiphar's too busy being an Egyptian high official to look after his wife very well, and the wife says, come on, Joseph, you can have a quick go with me. He says, no, I couldn't do that. You're my master's wife. Right? This isn't the Joseph who left his family behind and was taken away as a slave. This is a whole new Joseph. And of course, Potiphar's wife then claims that he assaulted her. He's thrown in prison. There's the episode with the baker, remember, has a dream, and Joseph says, well, look, sorry, mate, but curtains for you. And then there's the king's cupbearer, and Joseph says, well, I've got good news for you. You're going to be pardoned, and you're going to be the king's cupbearer again. And when you do, remember me. Not a chance. But eventually, the Pharaoh needs someone to interpret a dream for him, and the cupbearer remembers Joseph. And so Joseph becomes very important, second only to Pharaoh in Egypt. And then, next thing we know, his brothers rock up, because this is a famine not just in Egypt, there's a famine right through Canaan and everywhere. And so they rock up because they've got money, but they haven't got food. They will go down to Egypt. And so 10 of his brothers rock up. The father says, no, don't take Benjamin, because he's the only child of my beloved Rachel, and I couldn't bear it if something happened to him. If you get killed by bandits or something along the way, well, it's no great loss, you know. So they rock up and they come to Joseph, and Joseph thinks, how can I get the lot of them to come? So he plays a very mean trick on them, where he sends them away with food and so on, but hides some valuables in their sacks, and then accuses them of theft and keeps some of them there and says, right, bring your father back, and so on. And our reading this morning is the final chapter of this, where Joseph tells his brothers who he is. And this is definitely not the Joseph that left Canaan and was sold into slavery. This is a Joseph, the brothers didn't recognize him. He was dressed like an Egyptian. He spoke like an Egyptian. He was shaved and haircut like an Egyptian. He walked like an Egyptian, maybe. They did not recognize him. He was grown up as well. They did not recognize him. And even when he reveals himself to them, well, how do you think they feel? Oh, bleep. What is he going to do with us? And Joseph is God's man now. And he weeps with his brothers and bring the whole family back here, and you'll be safe and you'll be well looked after because of what God has done in my life, what God intended this to happen. God meant it to happen, and I'm here for a purpose. Like all of us, we are here for a purpose. And then we come to the New Testament story, a Canaanite woman. Now, the Jewish kingdom really came to a peak under David and Solomon, and then split into two under Solomon's sons, and the northern kingdom got taken away and pretty much lost. And the Jews, by Jesus' time, considered anyone who wasn't part of that southern kingdom. Funnily enough, the southern kingdom was called Judah, because that was the biggest tribe. The northern kingdom was called Israel. Excuse me. But the northern kingdom that were no longer Jews as far as the Jews were concerned, and they could consider them no better than dogs. so when this Canaanite woman comes, Jesus says, look, I'm sent to call the lost children of Israel. You're not part of that. It's not good to take the children's food and feed it to the dogs. Now, I'd like to think he said that with a little bit of a smile and a twinkle in his eye, because the Jew would normally say it with a scowl. And the woman comes back and says, yeah, but even the dogs get the crumbs under the table. And Jesus said, yay, good answer. Okay? This verse shows, I think, that Jesus has a sense of humour. You know, he likes a laugh as much as the next person. And he likes her quick quip and says, okay, yes, your daughter is healed. It's another relationship, a relationship not between two people really, but between two nations, Israel and, well, the not Israel people. And that's a very broken relationship in Jesus' time. And in fact, Jesus and his followers came to heal that relationship. And Jesus still wants to heal relationships. If you're in a relationship, or you know someone who's in a relationship which is fraught, which is dysfunctional, if you bring Jesus into that relationship, there is hope, and there is healing, and there is renewal. Just as in the relationship between Jesus and the Canaanite woman, there is hope and there is health for her daughter. Now, we have a lovely little library there, and our beautiful librarian, Kate, is very happy if you want some books on relationships or on any other subject. She would love to talk with you and point out what are good choices, or what she feels are good choices. And I've got one other thing I want to say too, and that's about Bible studies. I remember when I was fairly new in this church, and Gordon Sweeney Sr., does anyone here remember Gordon Sweeney Sr.? A few of us do. He said, come along to our prayer group. Oh my God, I couldn't do that. I'm not a great prayer like he and many other people within the congregation were and are. And it included some Bible study. Well, I don't know enough about the Bible to do that. But if you join, if you want to know more about the Bible, and it is fascinating, the more you read about it, the more you read of it, the more fascinating it is, the more interesting it gets, the more it has to teach you. So if you join one of the study groups, and we're going to have some during Advent, don't feel that you'll be the one there that doesn't know enough to participate, because you will find that in a group of half a dozen people, half of them will know even less than you. You might have some stuck-up know-it-all like me who knows perhaps a bit more, but I don't know everything, and I'm still learning. Do join in, because it's a wonderful way to grow your faith. Now, if anything that I've said this morning has sort of struck a chord with you, there are people who will be down the front who are happy to pray with you privately in your seat, out in the little annex there, down at the front, whatever. Do make use of what is being offered to you in this church, because in my life I've made use of what's being offered to me in this church, and I think I'm a much better person. Not perfect, far from it, but much better person than I was when I started coming here. And it's by taking up opportunities that this church has offered that my life has been changed. And if you're struggling, yours can be too. So God bless you. We have a hymn now, I think. So you may like to stand for this or may not. I will be kind to your ears. My voice is a bit, as you can hear, croaky. If it's a bit yesterday, I wouldn't have been able to speak. I'll turn the